How many problems are there in marriage? 5. So you guys are already experts. This is wonderful. This is wonderful. Now, the definition of love is not coming up there. Oh, because I have to turn it on. Okay, there we go. Love is meeting needs, pursuing and pleasing, even if you don't feel anything. In other words, if I want to love someone and not slip on the floor, then I meet their needs, I pursue their soul, and I please them, whether I feel like I want to do that or not. Now, what I want to talk with you about is, in my opinion, one of the most crucial of these columns, and we're going to spend time. I was going to try and put it together with the introduction last night, but there's just too much good stuff, and we'll have way too much fun. So what I want to talk with you about is ignoring needs. Turn to your spouse and just say to them, you have 7 needs, and I want to meet them. Very good. Did both of you say that, or did just one of you? Okay. Okay, very good. Now, let me help you understand. When you got married and you said, I do, that's what it meant. It meant, I am pledging myself to meeting your relational needs. And each of us have 7 of them, or 7 major ones. Interestingly enough, the Bible has been saying them for thousands of years. A number of years ago, a man by the name of John Gottman, up in secular man, not a Christian, he set up a house in Seattle, and he put cameras everywhere, and people who were having marital problems, he put them in there to just watch how they behaved and interacted. And what he discovered was the couples that actually survived marriage counseling and then made it forward were beginning to meet these same 7 needs that the Bible's been talking about for years. And he's written about it from a secular point of view, and I try and write about it from a biblical point of view. Now, what we want to talk about, let's see if I can get back up here and not fall off. Now, there are 7 needs that a wife has that a husband is pledging himself to meet. He's saying, this is my wife, and I'm going to meet them. I make those needs that your wife has spell out the word husband, H-U-S-B-A-N-D, so that you can remember, why is she acting this way? Oh, is it H? Is it U? Is it S? Is it B? Is it A? Is it N? Is it D? Because it's one of those. It's always one of those, unless it's not your fault, and then you get to go, woo, it's not my fault. About once every year, it's not my fault, and then I get to move forward. Then your husband, ladies, has 7 relational needs, and I made them spell out the word radical, because it's radical anymore when a wife meets her husband's relational needs. And so you have to say, is it R? Now, most of the time women will go, is it R? Is it A? Is it D? Is it I? Is it C? Oh, not C. Is it A? And then you go, I'm excited about meeting his relational needs. Because remember what I said last night, most men don't know what their wives' relational needs are. Most wives know, they just don't think he deserves to have them met. Okay, so we'll kind of get into this and we'll walk our way through this whole process. Now, I got to point that thing. Okay, there we go. This is what they are: honor, understanding, security, building unity, agreement, nurture, defender. For the husband, his needs are respect, adaptation, domestic leadership, intimacy, companionship, attractive soul, and body. Now, we're going to go back through that, so don't get too excited about that too fast here. Oh, that's interesting. Did we switch? You switched to the second. Oh, we switched to the wrong PowerPoint. I'm sorry. Can we go back to the first one? Or I can just talk about it because I got this all memorized. Okay. This stuff is so crucial. She's doing this. This is very exciting. Let me tell you a story. When I was new to the pastorate years and years ago, there was a very prominent couple in our church that was just a wonderful couple. And I remember the lady called me on the phone and she said, Pastor, can I see you? And I said, I'd love to talk with you. And so we met at this little sales trailer. We were a new startup church. And so she came in to see me, and she said, she sat down in a little metal chair across from me in this little sales trailer, and she said, I just need to let you know that my husband is a jerk, and I can't put up with it anymore, and I'm leaving him. And I went, oh, no, no. And so for the next hour, I gave her every verse about how to fix her marriage and why she should stay in her marriage, and she gave me all the evidence she had that her husband was a jerk and that she should leave. At the end of the hour, I was convinced her husband was a jerk. And I was completely out of bullets. I had nothing more. And so I just thought, and so I said, Lord, you got to help me here. You got to help me. And so in my mind just popped this idea, ma'am, could I ask you a favor? And she said, Pastor, what favor could I do for you? And I said, well, I've been convinced by you that your husband's a jerk. But would you, as a favor to me, wait 5 weeks before you leave him? And she said, why would I do that? She said, and I said, well, your husband, I know it probably won't do any good, but your husband has signed up for a brand new class I'm starting called Becoming a Godly Husband, and it will start in 2 weeks, and he'll be 3 weeks in 5 weeks. Now, it probably won't do any good for him, but just as a favor to me, would you wait 5 weeks to leave the jerk? And I remember she looked at me and she said, Pastor, as a favor to you, and only because it's you, I will wait 5 weeks before I leave him. And I remember I ushered her out of the sales, and afterwards I got, Lord, this has got to work. Come on. And so he came to the class, and we began to do totally different kinds of things, teaching out of the book that I was writing, Becoming a Godly Husband. And 3 weeks into it, I remember they came to church, and she was all decked out, hair, jewelry, clothing. And I thought, she's hunting. She's looking for the next misters. And then she would go over to a group of ladies, and lean in, and they would all listen to her, and she'd go, da, 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 and then they would all go, and then, she's telling them. And so out of a desire for pastoral knowledge and prayer accuracy, I leaned in to her telling a group of ladies in our little church, and I overheard her say, if you had a husband like my husband, in the last few weeks it's been just delightful, and you would be back in love with him just like I am. And I went, it works! The Bible actually works! Now, what I want to talk with you about is, if you and I commit ourselves to meeting the relational needs of our spouse, the dynamic of our marriage just goes up and up and up and up and up, and it can just keep growing. I want to teach you what those are. So let's jump into this. Okay. The first one is honor. Your wife, gentlemen, needs you to put her first in your life. She needs you to honor her, and it usually means 3 things. It means that you would put her number 1, you would compliment her every day, and you would pass her tests. Now, gentlemen, you don't do this, but ladies do this. Every single day, your wife needs to know where she is on your priority structure. And if I were to ask any of the ladies right now in this room, where are you ranking in your husband's priority structure? Is it, and they can tell you exactly, it's job, boat, kids, them. They know exactly where they are. And they take a test every day. Now, what happens is that they run the test on you to find out if they've moved up, or because if they're not number 1, guess who loses? You do. You do. Now, see what they do. They do things like, now, this is not malicious. This is just what they do. They wait until you get home, you have a slice of pizza in your hand, you have a soda or beer or whatever it is you like, and then you have the game on, and and they say, honey, could you take out the trash for me? And you think it's a trash assignment. It isn't. It's a test. Am I more important than your rear end and the comfort of stuff in your belly? And they will do this every single day, gentlemen. Every single day. Until you pass the test every day for 3 months. And then after 3 months, something inside of them says, he does love me. He does think I'm important. Now, you haven't played golf in a while, go play golf. And they will begin to change that process. But you have to pass the test, and you need to compliment your spouse and pass the, I do this with men's group all the time. And the guys went, you can't believe the test she ran on me. And one guy, he's a huge Oregon football fan. She asked me in the Oregon game to get up and do something else. I said, yeah, because she knows that right now Oregon football's #1, and she knows that God says that she ought to be. So she's running the test. So that's way too convicting, so let's move on. Okay, so you got to treat her as #1, you got to pass the test, and you got to compliment her. You got to say, boy, this is great. You're just compliment every day. And it can't always be this, your hair is nice. It has to be something new and different, that kind of thing. Okay. In fact, interestingly enough, this goes for both sides. They just did a study, and they found that the number one quality in great marriages is that husbands and wives are grateful. If you don't hear anything else I'm saying, what I want you to do is I want you to write down 10 things you're grateful for about your spouse, and then just mix it into the conversation. I do this thing where I go into our bedroom, and every once in a while I'll pull out the drawer with the socks in it, and I'll just go, oh, it's full again! Oh my goodness! Something has happened, isn't this amazing? Because I'm a little bit more dramatic than my wife is. Because it's a magic underwear drawer. It fills again! Oh! And she gets a kick out of it, that kind of, anyway, now, then, she thinks that kind of gets her another dinner or whatever. Anyway, now let's go on. Let's talk about respect. Your wife, gentlemen, needs you to respect her, or actually men, wives, your husband needs you to respect him. It is not a function of whether he's earned it by meeting all your standards. He desperately needs you to value him. The word respect is this idea of acknowledging value. He goes to work and he does things and he wants you to say, oh, men married their wives every time, because you gave evidence that you respected him. And as soon as the respect goes away, it's hard for him to stay engaged in the marriage. Now, many wives believe that if they withhold respect because he's throwing his underwear on the floor, he's got skid marks and, all kinds of other things going on, and come on. And she says, I'm going to withhold it, and he'll then earn it. He won't earn it. The way you get him to do more is give him more respect. It's kind of the opposite kind of thing. Because men are basically, they desperately need someone to champion that they're okay. I saw one man who was just a wonderful guy at the church, and his wife was very, very strong, and she was on a campaign to destroy his respect. And she did it with the kids. Look at what daddy did. Look at this, it was terrible. And she, over the course of about 10 or 15 years, destroyed this man's self-respect until he finally slunk away from the home at her suggestion and lived on a boat until he died. It was horrible. Ladies, you control the energy inside your husband through how much respect you give him. I'm so glad you go to work every day. I'm so glad that you put up with us. I'm so glad. And it's about gratefulness, but it's really about respect, that sense of, she thinks I'm pretty great. My wife knows every dirty, horrible, awful thing about me. The wonderful thing is she never brings it up. She tells people, oh, he does this well and he does that well. And so that makes me just want to go over the moon for her. Now, let's go on. Understanding. The Bible tells men to do something for their wives that they don't believe can be done. The Bible in 1 Peter chapter 3 says, men, live with your wives in an understanding way. It tells you men to understand women. And American culture has become convinced that's not possible. Now, let me help you understand. It's totally possible. You just have to understand how they think different than you think. Women do a number of things that men don't do. And ladies, you don't understand that men don't do this anymore. Women, by nature, are able to visualize things that are not true at the moment. they can, like if I say to my wife, I'm going out. She says, where are you going? And I want to say to myself, why do you care? I'm out. But she wants to know where I'm going. And so, because if I say Target, when I say Target, every man in the room sees the sign Target. Every woman sees her Target with the roof pulled off in a three-dimensional model from above it. Because if I say, I'm going to get some undershirts, because she'll say, what are you going to get? She sees me going, okay, if he goes this way, it's the long way. He's going to go buy candy and everything. But if he goes this way, he goes buy women's stuff. And she can be with me. She can totally be with me. And that's why she's asking all these questions, because even though she's not there, she can be there. And I'm thinking, stop asking questions. Somewhere around 9 to 12 years of age, every boy goes through a testosterone wash, and that ability gets washed out of their brain. Seriously, it does. Because if you talk to a 9-year-old boy, 7, 8, 9, they act like a woman. They'll say, where are you going, Dad? Can I go? No, you can't. Well, tell me about it. And they had that same ability to visualize. By the way, that's why wives are better worriers. Because if you don't call when you're late, you're not just could be in a ditch with blood in you. You are there until the corpse calls and says you're not. Does this make sense? And so you have to understand. Now, the other things that ladies do that men don't do is men tend to, not all men, but many men live on the left side of their brain. It's very linear. And if you think of it like a pinball machine, okay, and the ball goes up, which is a thought, and it comes down, there's nothing in the middle to block it. It just goes down to the flippers, and it's very logical. Bing, 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 bing. But for ladies, they treat feelings as facts. What you feel about something could cause a thought to go in a new direction. So they have all kinds of little ding, 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 and flippers up in the top part. And you see a thought, it goes, whoa, and you think it's going to come right here. No, you, ding, 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 and it's flying in this direction, and you're trying to get it. Why? Your wife is completely logical if you just understood the things that her thoughts bounce off of. And you know what God says? You can. You can. But we have to get over the myth. I've written whole chapters on, there's a whole book on that, Understanding the Mind of a Woman. I was carrying that book. It's written by a wonderful, godly man. I was carrying that book to a secular engagement where I was going to pray. 3 different men read the title on the book, Understanding the Mind of a Woman. 3 separate men said to me, what is it, a blank book? That is the way men think. Now, what I want to help you understand, I don't have the time to tell you how to do it, but we have so much fun teaching men in this Godly Husband course how to understand. It's completely logical, and they'll come back to me the first couple weeks. Well, why did she say this? And I'll say, probably because that. And they'll go ask, that's what's right. Your wife is completely logical. She's not too emotional. She just has more little flippers and things on the top part of her brain. So that's a whole other story. So, gentlemen, you this weekend get to understand your wife. Now, let's go on. By the way, if you're going to understand her, I had to say this because your wife is more sensitive than you are. I worked for the Teamsters for about 3 years, driving truck for Coca-Cola, and Teamsters and construction people are a little salty. And they can swear and cuss and, oh, you are so ugly. And we kind of, as guys, we love it. And one man said, it's like we're buffaloes. We have thick skins and we just rub up against each other. Oh, man, you're so ugly and you stink. And this way we kind of insult each other as friends, okay? And what happens is that since it works for guys and it kind of makes us friends and bonds us, we bring it home. Now, you gentlemen are buffaloes with thick skin. Your wife is a butterfly. Riding on the currents of the air in terms of her feelings, in terms of her sensitivities. Now, this is the illustration that really changed my world. If you take a pebble this big and you throw it as hard as you can at a buffalo, the buffalo, What was that? The gnat? Now that can be an insult, it can be a comment, it can be a sarcastic remark. If you take the exact same pebble and tape it to the wing of a butterfly, what happens? They can't fly. I remember teaching this to couples in my church. And I had the privilege of leading a man to Christ who came out of gangs, and his wife came out of an escort service. And it was kind of an interesting marriage that they had. But they both came to Christ. It was very wonderful. And they were learning how to love like Jesus would. And they were talking. He came home from work, and he said something, and as they were walking down the hall, and he didn't think anything of it. And he got out to the living room, and he said, "Honey," and she wasn't there. And he looked back in the hallway, and there she was. She was laying down on the ground. And he rushed back, and she said, "I can't hardly breathe with the boulder you just threw." And he got it. He realized that his sarcastic, gang-like responses were destroying his wife, even though his buddies on the motorcycles and at work could handle it. And a light went on. Oh, she's different. Yeah, hello. Now, I'm having such a hard time not telling you everything. Let me just keep. You're not listening fast enough. Okay. Now, one of the things that your husbands, ladies, desperately need you to do is to adapt to him. Now, what most ladies want to do is they want to adapt to the perfect man. They want to adapt to, if you're older, Robert Redford. If you're younger, who knows, Justin Timberlake or whatever else. Or you want to adapt to the pastor and how he sounds like he is at home. Although, talk to his wife. He's probably totally different than that. And what I want to help you understand is when you signed up to marry this man, you signed up to adapt to him. And he has strengths and weaknesses. He has some things he'll never do. He has some things that he does really well. Unfortunately, many times most of the time we were programmed by our fathers, and if our fathers repaired things, we think men repair things. No, your father did. Thankfully, I'm married to a woman whose father could not repair anything just like me. Because if my wife's father had been like my father, I'm toast. I'm totally toast. Because what we need is we need you to adapt to him, and this is the question we desperately need you to answer. What do I have to do to make this man a success? And by the way, let me just tell you, that's the real definition of the S word that has been crammed down too many women's throats. It means adapt. Now, let me just tell you, there's some of you, I would ask for a show of hands, but it might not be helpful. There are some of you ladies who are very strong. You are maybe better leaders than your husbands. You are very strong. God's given you gifts of leadership, and it's wonderful. And I get a lot of my marriage counseling stuff from women who are technically stronger than their husbands. And so what I say is, God didn't make a mistake, but what I need you to do is I need you to adapt to who he is, not try and follow him, but to lead him in Jesus to the fullness of his potential. I remember I was working with 4 women, and I said, what would it take? Because they were complaining, oh, my husband doesn't do this, my husband doesn't do that, my husband doesn't do this. I said, what would it take for your husband to be spiritual? Oh, he'd have to get in a Bible study. And I remember I talked to all 4 of them. You're a leader, find a way to get him into a Bible study. I can do that? I said, yeah. So I had to laugh because I told him on Monday. On Wednesday, I get a call from one of the ladies' bosses, husband's boss, at this company that he worked at, and he said, I just had this brilliant idea that I'd like to have a pastor come and lead a Bible study at work for all the men. And I thought, I bet it was a brilliant idea you just thought of. I knew exactly where it came from. It came from this woman. And so her husband, who was at work, was stuck in a Bible study that her pastor was leading, and he started growing in faith in Christ because she said, I'm adapting to him, and he's never going to go to a Bible study at church, but I can do it at work, because she was moving the levers. And he grew, she grew, they had a great marriage. Can I just tell you, it's your job, ladies, you're smart. How do we move this forward? How do we adapt? Okay, now let's go on. Security. Gentlemen, your wife needs you to create security in her marriage. Now, many of us as men, we think about physical security, locks on the doors, guns, and that kind of stuff, and that's not where a wife's security is coming from. Her security is, how secure is this relationship? How secure are we financially? How secure are we emotionally? And there are 4 general areas: financial security, security from abuse, verbal, that kind of thing, comparison. By the way, we have a rule in our home. I have 4 girls. I'm swimming in a sea of estrogen. If I'm watching football and they have a shot of the cheerleaders, my eyes have to get to their eyes before their eyes get to my eyes. Or I lose. Because my girls, all 4 of them, the 3 girls and my wife, they need me to put them ahead of anybody else. If you, as a husband, come home and vomit on your wife emotionally, that's a form of abuse. And that destroys her ability to respond to you. Now, let me just help you a second. Gentlemen, you have the ability to flip a switch and think, I need sex, and I need it right now. And you just, okay. Wives don't work like that. They're more like an iron. It takes 2 or 3 days to warm up. You got to turn it on a couple days ahead. And if you're just, it's your fault, how come you bought the expensive marshmallows or whatever? She's not going to be able to respond because her security has been threatened, okay? And you need to pledge yourself to say, I'm going to handle the financial side to make sure that we have enough money. You know what I found? I found that I have to, in order to bless my wife, I have to say no to some of the things she wants to purchase so that she likes me later. You understand what I'm saying? Because I got to have this much money in the bank, because if I don't have this much money in the bank, then she feels all, and so I say, honey, I love you, but no, we can't do that. And do you see how that works? Now, let's go on. Domestic leadership. Now, this is a very tricky one in our day and age, but the Bible's pretty clear. The Bible calls wives the oika despotas, the house despot. Because, and every study that I've ever read, from the secular side as well as the Christian side, says that the ladies seem to have an ability to engineer and know what makes a house work better than most men. Now, in a few cases that's different, but most of the time, and the Bible keeps saying, now that's not the only thing she has to do, but she's usually the person who needs to be engineering how the home life works. We need to have dinner at this time, we need to do this, you need to work on the homework, honey, and the kids need to do this, and she needs to be the leader at home. Now, I know a number of guys who are saying, I think they ought to be this way, ought to be that way. But if you're not willing to let her leadership rise up to build, then you've created an environment in which you're asking her to lead, but not giving her the ability to. And you destroy something inside of her. That's a whole nother discussion. Now, building unity, it is absolutely crucial, gentlemen, that you lead your wife into unity with you and the kids. Not lead her as, this is what I want and you have to do what I say. That is not what the Bible's talking about. Unity is the idea that you would share common enemies. Now, I wrote a book called Becoming a Godly Husband, and we were doing television interviews for publication and that kind of thing. And they made sure that my wife was there. So after we got on live TV, the interviewer said to my wife, of all the principles your husband talks about in his book, which one do you appreciate the most and which one is the most meaningful to you? And my wife said, this one. She said, my husband makes sure that no matter what happens to our marriage or to any of us, he and I are never on opposite sides of the line. She said, he draws this crooked line, so him and I are always on the same side fighting the evil boss or the evil church or the evil that together. She said, I'm never the common enemy. I'm never the enemy. The danger, gentlemen, is the first response you have is, my wife is the reason for this problem. You can't go there if you want a great marriage. Now, by the way, if you go there, gentlemen, enough, your wife will go there right with you. And then once you become the enemy, she is more equipped at making your life miserable than you are. So don't go there. Does this make sense? Now, we have a whole chapters. We have 3 or 4 chapters in the book on that whole idea. Now, let's talk about this. Intimacy. When I get to this, most men say, I don't need any of the others, I just need that. That's not true. But this is usually number 1, 2, or 3. Now, let me help you understand something, ladies. All people understand that women have a cycle. And the cycle goes every 28 days to 30 days, depending upon a particular woman, but usually 28 to 30 days. And that 28 to 30 days goes through a physiological process that renders a woman interested in sexual activity about 2 or 3 days a month, right at the peak of her childbearing process. 2 days to 3 days a month. What most people don't understand is that men also have a cycle, a completely different cycle. Every single day of the normal man's life, his body creates about 100 million little Navy guys called semen. And when his body, now every day, he's just sitting here, and Herman's creating little Navy guys, okay? Jeff's creating little Navy guys, okay? I'm creating little Navy guys, okay? 100 million of them every day. When his body gets somewhere between 400 million to 500 million little Navy guys, his whole body starts singing, anchors away, my boys, anchors away. It's time to launch the boats. Let's go. We got excess recruitment. Let's go. Let's go. Everything in the world looks sexual. The doorknob looks sexual. Boy, that fan looks sexual. Oh my goodness. Wow, you look really good, honey. Ha ha, what do you think? Now, you need to understand, because many ladies think, I'm normal and I'm interested once a month. He's abnormal. He's sexually crazed. He's weird. No, he's responding exactly the way his body meant it to be. Now, most men create between 100 million to 200 million little Navy guys every day. And that man, the typical man, is interested in sexual activity, releasing the excess production of Navy recruitment every other day to every 5 days. He needs to release. And if he doesn't release, it's got to reabsorb, or he's very interested in pornography, he's very moving in these other directions. And now, you didn't know that, did you? You didn't know that your husband's just sitting there creating little Navy guys. You can just look at him and go, oh, I know what you're doing. That's what he's doing. That's why a man can be interested and able to perform every other day. Because we got excess production. Okay. Now, let me just tell you, they have done enough clinical studies, enough scientific studies. A man cannot create more Navy guys than every other day. If he says he's interested in it 5 times a day or every day, that usually, not always, but usually suggests some kind of pornographic or some kind of thing, because it gets your mind involved, and your Navy production is empty. You're shooting blanks. That's a whole different deal. But now, just thought I'd throw that in. Now, let me help you understand. Every couple that I've ever met who has a great marriage, they have sexual reaction, sexual intimacy in 3 different ways. And you have to talk about this. You have to figure it out. I'm amazed at how everybody's interested in it, but nobody talks about it. If you're going to have a great marriage, you got to have 3 kinds of sex in your marriage. There is wow kind of sex. So write that down. Wow, W-O-W, wow. And that's the kind of sex, intimacy, when she's interested in her 2 or 3 days, and he's interested. Wow! Now, men, you need to understand, if you have been verbally abusive or mentally abusive in the days leading up to that, that day will go by, and you get next month. Okay, but wow is when she's excited, and he's excited, and the guy's thinking, why can't it be like this all the time? What about tomorrow? What do you think? Because he's thinking, I can make more Navy guys. Let's do it. But usually you get a wow about once a month. Now, let me just tell you, when my kids were small and they were out of school during the summer, I knew when her wow time was coming in June, July, and August, and I booked a room in a local hotel and had a babysitter overnight, because I'm not going to miss the wow. It's only coming once a month. And we had some really good wow times. She's amazing. Now, the second kind of intimacy that all couples need is what's called normal intimacy. Normal intimacy, and everything from Ann Landers to the sexual experts tell us this is what happens. And that is, the man is interested, or, now let me just tell you, 30% of the time, it can be reversed where the lady is more interested in the husband. So if that's you, then that's great. No problem with that. You're not weird, it's just different. Normal is when the man is interested, or the person who's more interested, and the other person can be talked into it. Okay, we have to do this now. Okay, and then you get into it, and the guy tends to judge himself, can I get her into it? And what you have to understand, it really doesn't have anything to do with you. It has to do with whether she's willing to, okay, maybe this would be pleasure. It's not as good as shopping, and I'm making my grocery list, and there's other things that, we should clean this out. But she could be talked into it, okay? About once a week, okay? Now, let me just say, great couples have normal sexual activity about once a week, okay? Now, usually one of those is a wow, okay? The other 3 are, I could be talked into it if you were really good and the music was right. Okay. The third kind that you have to interact, now, I'm telling you all this so that you can talk about it, because you're at a conference without your kids, and everybody else will know that when you giggle, they're talking about that. And you can. The third kind is quickies. Quickies. What are quickies? Your husband is interested in sexual activity every 2 to 3 to 4 days. You're not. So therefore, it's, okay, the car needs to be lubed, put it up on the rack, let's work with it, okay, let's take care of it, okay, moving on. And you're not engaged at all, but you're helping him because he's got a problem, and he's got to get rid of this excess Navy recruitment. You got to have a way to talk about that. You got to have a way to do those. Now, every great couple, they really don't want us to talk about it, but they usually have 2 or 3 different ways of doing quickies. Or, you have a need? Okay, let's deal with it this way. And it can be really disheartening to the guy. This is all this is. It's just a lube job. It's just a, wow. But hey, it's cool. It's, Now, some couples have those little statues or figurines on the mantle, the old farmer with the rake and the lady. And when the guy turns his towards her, that means, what do you think? I don't know what your signals are, but somehow you have to figure out how to have wows, normals, and quickies. Ladies, you have to discuss this with your husband. Now, the good news, ladies, after a man turns 50, it starts slowing down. He's less able to produce Navy guys. But you can still have this great process. And you just have to talk about it. You just have to say, how do we do this? And it's not your need. Your need is once a month. You think normal is just like you. And it isn't, because your husband is a strange creature that has a physiological need to get rid of a bunch of Navy guys every other day to every 5 days. Okay, now, let's go on. Since it's getting hotter in here right now. Let's go on. Okay, agreement. You have to have a way to come to agreement when you disagree. I'm amazed. I've done enough marriage counseling. I was just absolutely amazed that most people don't know how to do it. And so if you disagree on what kind of vacuum cleaner to buy or what kind of car to buy or whether to get this thing for Halloween or not, typically what couples are now doing is they're saying, if I buy it first, then I've already won. And so then he has to deal with it or she has to deal with it. And that is not a system. That's not a system. So I had to actually invent and teach a system to couples, and it walks through, I think I have it up here, 5 phases. Now, if you want to write these down, it's in the books that we've written here on this, is the first phase is the discussion phase, where you say to your spouse, husband or wife, tell me what you think we ought to do. And here's the rule. No decision can come out of that. Tell me, you want to buy this kind of car. You want to buy a vacuum cleaner that stands upright, even though the better ones are the ones that run along the floor. Whatever. Okay, let's just have a discussion, and I will tell you my point of view, but we can't decide anything. I've even seen some couples have to have a card they put on the table. This is the discussion phase. No decisions are allowed. Then you go to the next phase, which usually is the options phase, where you say, what are the other options? How could we combine what we both think? Are there other options that we could consider? And so we start writing down options, okay? Now, it could be in another discussion or separately. And then we go to the counsel phase. I remember I'd have to say to my wife, who do you think we ought to talk to in order to convince me that you're right and we ought to do it your way? And she would always list, my dad. And then she would list, if we were she wanted to buy a Ford, she'd say, the Ford salesman. And then she'd go right, and so I'd call all those people. I'd meet with all those people. And then I would say, here's the people I think you ought to talk to be convinced of. And what always happened, always, was out of the counsel phase, new options would emerge, new theories, new ideas. And so it would be just this fascinating thing. I remember my wife wanted us to buy a particular Ford car, and I wanted to buy a Honda. And so we went through this, and she listed Ford salesman. So we went to the Ford dealer, and I was praying, and the Ford dealer asked my wife, ma'am, why do you want to buy one of our cars? And she said, for this, and we got the kids, we got another kid on the way, and la, 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 la. And he looked at her, and I just couldn't believe it. The Ford salesman said, ma'am, you don't need to buy one of our cars. You probably need to buy a Honda. And I went, Jesus is alive. And I thought, Now, it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes it happens in reverse. Does that make sense? Where a lot of times she's the smarter one and I just have to take time to be convinced of that. Okay, are you with me here? And then the next phase is the prayer phase. The prayer phase. And that's where we have in our living room this thing we call the prayer ottoman. It's really an ottoman. It's an old ottoman from one of our couches. And we gather around the prayer ottoman, and I lead the family. Let's pray about what we ought to do. Let's ask the big guy what his counsel to us would be. We've gotten all the options. We've gotten all the counsel. And then the final phase is the decision phase. Now, in my understanding of the Bible, I'm responsible for the decision that's made so that the wisest decision. I don't get to have my way. Jesus holds me responsible to make the decision that's best for our family. And so when we get to the decision phase, I'll say, honey, we've looked at all these different ones, and if I'm understanding right, this is the right one. What you said or this or how we've mixed it all together, do you agree? Because I think we're going to need within a week or two to make this decision, and I need your full support. This is what we've talked about. So it's a whole process. That process can take an hour or it can take 5 years. But here's the deal. If you ram down the throat of your spouse, your decision, husband or wife, without really going through a process, you destroy so much. And I know people, we gotta make this decision. No, some people just want to. Take the time. It's better for you two to be together than to get the car you want or the vacuum or the this or the that or the dress for formal or whatever else. Because your spouse needs to trust you that we're a team. And yes, husbands, I believe you have the final say, but if you use it for your own selfish purposes, God will make sure your prayers aren't answered. So don't do that. That's stupid. So anyway, let's move on. That's way too convicting. Okay. Companionship. In almost every man I've ever met, one of the reasons he gets married is to have someone to be his companion. He wants you to be with him. He wants you to connect with him. And most wives during the dating phase was willing to go along with what he's interested in, fishing or baseball or whatever else. But he really wants you to connect into it. Now, let me just say, there are some things that men, you don't want your wives to get into because she's just never going to be good enough for you to appreciate her. So that's fine. But there are many areas, ladies, where he wants you to be a part of it or understand it. One of the greatest things that I ever have is when my wife sits right there when I preach or when I teach. She's my companion. And when I remember, she'll usually go, and she takes notes so that at lunchtime she can tell me all the wonderful points I made. Twice in our 27 years of marriage, she's looked at me when I've looked down and she went. And I went, oh no. One of the times I agreed with her, the other time I didn't, and we had this fascinating lunchtime. But I don't know, ladies, what your husband wants you to be his companion with. Now, let me just tell you, I think I put it up here. There's 5 kinds of companions, and you have to figure out what your husband wants. There's the cheerleader. Oh, you're the greatest. There's the watcher. You just sit in the stands. One of the men in my church, him and his boys raced quad runners, and his wife hated it every Friday night. But he said to her, honey, it means so much to the boys and me when we're down there racing and we're doing this stuff. When we look up, there you are. I don't need you to do anything except raise your hand if we look up. So she would bring books and blankets and be covered like in an igloo with a little face like this. And when they would look up, she would raise her hand, and she's golden. You know, once an hour, just raise her hand. And that's all that family needed. Just, and then they'd crash and smash and all that. Some people want watchers, some people want cheerleaders. Some people want participants. My wife tried to be a golf participant with me, just did not work. She's not into that, and I'm getting lousier as we go along, so eventually we may be able to do it together. But you just have to figure out what is it that he's interested in. And then the final one, most ladies, most men do not want this last category. That is coach. My wife is an absolute expert in exercise stuff. She's this fittest person on the planet kind of thing. She did a doctorate in nursing with a specialization in Pilates, and she's now doing postdoctoral work in Pilates. She can bend and stretch. And so if I start to do a sit-up, she'll say, you want to know how to do that right? She's very gracious, and I'll say, no, it's just enough that I bent an inch. That's as good as it gets here. And so what we've discovered is I don't respond well to her as my coach. I champion her. She's amazing, but I don't want her to be the coach. Does this make sense, ladies? So just realize if you're really good at something and you really want to help him because he's really messing up, he may not want your help. Okay, let's go on, because that's way too convicting. Okay. Nurture. Gentlemen, your wife is like a tree, a fruit tree that's growing in your yard. And it needs sunlight, it needs water, it needs fertilizer, and it needs to be weeded. If I have an apple tree, which I do, in my backyard, and I walk out to the apple tree, and it's getting a little brown, and it's not producing good apples, and I grab the trunk and I say, come on, how come you're not producing? Come on! It doesn't help. Yelling at the apple tree isn't going to help. What the apple tree needs is it needs the right fertilizer, it needs the right sunlight, it needs the right amount of water, and it needs to be weeded. Let me tell you, gentlemen, what your wife needs. In this nurture area, in the spiritual arena, she needs you to understand her spirit and guide her spirit into the greatest process. In the mental area, she needs you to have a conversation with her every day for about an hour. That's why, by the way, I pull up a chair and I sit with my wife and I have an appointment and I just say, honey, tell me about your day. Tell me what you're thinking. And we just eyeball to eyeball. I don't need that, but she does. And she tells me and she debriefs. And sometimes we go off into what I think about it, a lot of times what she thinks about it. And she knows that she has her best friend who's going to listen to her every day. We'll talk about tonight why that's true for women and it's not true for men. But your wife absolutely needs to have intimate, regular communication with you. Now, ladies, let me just help you understand. Your husband produces 100 million little Navy guys, and every other day he's interested in sexual activity. Gentlemen, every day your wife wants about an hour of your time to listen to her. They're almost the opposites of each other. She wants this one, you want this one. Work that through in your mind. Okay, now, then she needs, her emotional need is she needs to be pursued or romanced. Let me tell you what romance means. Romance for guys means the release of Navy guys. That is not what romance is for a woman. Romance for a woman is, I want to pursue your soul in an improved context and learn about you. That's what it means. So that means a date every week. She has that need about once every week for you to pursue her. What many men say to themselves is, I'm already married to her, why should I date her? I already got her, I already bagged the bouquet, put it on the wall. I'm on the bus, why should I try and get on it again? What's the deal? What you don't understand, gentlemen, is your wife has a desperate need for you to be interested in what she thinks, what she feels, what she wants to talk about. And that's a date. Now, we have in our home two things. We have a staff meeting every week on Saturdays. I'm missing mine today. In which we talk about the kids and how we're going to handle that and what we're going to do with the finances and where we're going to go on our schedules. And then we have a date. And why do we have a staff meeting and a date? Because if I don't have a staff meeting, then my date becomes a staff meeting. And wives don't appreciate that. When it's all about the water heater and it's all about the kids and what are we doing there. She wants to have a date. And one of the things that I've done in the past, my wife really appreciates this, is I'll write a list of questions from the week, newspaper articles. What do you think about the Supreme Court? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? I'll have it in the glove box. So when we're on our date, I've given her total permission. If what we're talking about is not interesting to you, reach into the glove box and pull out the sheet and answer those questions. What cracks me up is sometimes when we're in the most exciting conversation for me, she reaches into the glove box. Because she said, okay, we've talked about that enough. Okay, this is work. Let's go on. Okay, now, then, I didn't talk to you about the physical nurture. Your wife needs to be touched tenderly in a non-sexual way. That means that you have to touch her regularly in a way that doesn't say, I want it to go to the bedroom. I talked with one couple, I remember working with them, and I was sitting in the kitchen with the husband and the wife, and I said to the wife, when was the last time your husband touched you and you didn't want it to go to the bedroom? She looked at me, and then she looked up, and she looked out, and then she looked at him. She kind of figured out whether it was safe, and she said, 10 years. In other words, he had not touched her in a gentle, caring, loving, non-sexual way for 10 years. And she was starving to death of that kind of fertilizer. Okay, now, let's go on. attractive soul and body. Ladies, your husband desperately needs for the best of you to become your soul. Now, he married you because you're beautiful. Now, I know many wives don't think that, but if he married you, you're beautiful. And by definition, you're the most beautiful woman in the world because you're the only one he can have sex with without guilt. So you are the most beautiful woman in the world. It's the greatest thing in the world. Now, but let me help you understand, ladies, something you already know. You will sag and get old and wrinkly. Now, many of you are fighting it exceptionally well. This is a very beautiful crowd. But what the scripture says is, as gravity takes its toll and age takes its toll, the most blessed and radiant part of you needs to become your soul. Because it says, let the quiet spirit and the gentle spirit and this blessed soul radiate out of you. I remember this one lady that I dated years before I met my wife. And there was this lineup of men who were trying to date her. And I remember thinking, she's just the greatest, she's just the greatest. And if I could have married her, I would have. But she chose another guy. And what was interesting, I was talking to a friend of mine, actually my boss, and he said, she's ugly. What were you doing? And what I realized was she had the most beautiful soul I have ever met in my life. And now my wife's soul is better, but what's amazing to me, I had a man I was working with, he's in his 80s. He was my landlord, and I was down there talking with him, and we were talking about rent and everything, and he said, look at that radiant creature over there. She's so beautiful. Oh, she's gorgeous. And I looked over, and there was his wife with a walker and Coke bottle bottom glasses and a smock. And he described her, and I could see it. I could see it because he saw her soul, and her soul was so beautiful. Ladies, there will be a time when your beauty cannot attract, but your soul will always be able to attract. And that's why Scripture says, develop the beautiful soul. Because the proof in the pudding. How many of you have ever watched beautiful actresses get married to beautiful actors, and they hate one another in a year or two and get divorced? It's not beauty, it's the soul. Because I need someone whose soul is beautiful to be with. That's what I need. Okay, now let's go on. Oh, I guess we're over. I guess we're over time. So did we, I pressed the wrong one? Oh, we're back. Okay, there we go. Thank you. I thought, okay, yeah, some of you who are melancholies, you just need that blank. Okay, so let me talk to you about, okay, gentlemen, your wife needs you to defend her. Now, there are all kinds of things she needs you to defend her from. There are people in her life that are toxic to her. They will convince her to buy things, convince her to think things that are wrong. And so you need to be the person who says, honey, can we talk about your friend Emily or Sally or whatever? I know you don't like to be with them, but they're so strong, they seem to overpower you. Blame me for why you can't be with them. My husband has some other things. You need to defend her. Help figure out a way so that she can be defended from toxic people, toxic information. My wife loves, we talked about this, my wife loves to watch those movies that come Hallmark Channel where the baby dies in the bottom of the ocean and all those kinds of things. You know, it's so emotional and all that stuff. And she'll be sick and depressed for 2 or 3 days. The baby died. Oh, they broke up. And it's so sad. I said, it's not real. Come on, wake up. And that's not helpful. So what we've discovered is that I have to say, honey, I just don't think that's the best movie to watch. Just like she says to me, I think there's going to be too many lungs exposed in that movie. You can't watch that. Right? So she has things that she restricts from me, and I have things that I say I don't think, because that affects you. So I have to defend her in that way. Okay? Now, you get the gist of that. And then, listener. Ladies, let me tell you something you don't want to hear, but is true. Your husband needs a psychotherapist. And it's you. Now, men wives need to talk interactively about their day and about what they're thinking and feeling. Men don't do it interactively. They want to sit down and tell the same stories about the same people with the same conclusions 100 times and have you tell, oh no, you were right. You were totally right. Oh yeah, I can't believe Joe did that. Oh, it's terrible. And you have to, just like the counselor, not roll again. And there is a place at which you earn his trust, because what he desperately wants to do is have someone who is so close to him and knows who he is, but still respects him, and who still says, I love you, and tell me again. And then every once in a while, not as often, ladies, as you'd like, you get to say, maybe we might do this next time. Maybe we might do that next time. Because your husband desperately needs someone he can bring it out to. We'll talk about why tonight. Now, your homework is to look at this, and husbands, you have to look at what your wife needs and say, which one can I grow in? Just one, not all of them, one. Ladies, you need to say, what one area can I grow in to help my husband become all he can be? Now, if you really, really want to push it, you can say to your spouse, which one of your needs do you want me to get a little better at? Now, this is not argue about, this is just which. Now, you don't have to do that, but it would be a fascinating discussion, okay? Okay? Now, let me pray for you, because you have an assignment. Heavenly Father, all of these couples here are here because they want to be better. Wherever they are, they want to meet the needs of their spouse, and they want desperately for their spouse to meet their needs. May this begin to be the beginning of talking that through, of walking through a process that just a little bit of difference, just a few righteous choices could be made today that could change their marriage over a few months. In Jesus' name, amen.